Hey, this is Matt once again. Welcome back to another review of another 80s horror film, and this time it is Psycho 2. Now, Psycho 2, I know this is a sequel that kinda getting the respect it deserves. Kinda. I mean, I would say in a way it is. I mean, even when it came out, there's some people like, wow, this is a lot better than I thought it would be. But I've reviewed the Psycho films in the past. Those reviews are still on the channel. I reviewed all four and then the remake. I'm not sure if there's a playlist of it, but if you go to my channel, go to magnifying glass and type like Psycho or Psycho 2 or Psycho whatever. Again, the reviews are still up, including my rant on the remake. But Psycho 2 is my favorite because what I liked about it, I thought Tom Holland's writing and Richard Franklin's direction were really spot on, because this of course takes place over 20 years since the original Psycho. Norman Bates has been released from the institution to go back to civilian. And while like the first Psycho, it's Janet Leigh's story, tell what happens to her, then a little bit of Norman Bates, then more of the sister character and Vera Miles and more. This one is through and through Anthony Perkins' story, Norman Bates' story. I thought this was really interesting in the fact that, you know, this is a guy who is psycho, but they really make you feel sorry for this character. And then when you find out at the end, it's almost like a very tragic movie. It just makes you feel more sorry for this character that has murdered people, but yet you feel sorry for him. And that's a tough thing to do. That's a tough balancing act, and I thought this film really succeeded in that. Jerry Goldsmith worked on the music, and he did a nice job, and did not just copy, you know, the famous, you know, Psycho theme. He did its own. I thought I did a fairly good job. The supporting cast, you have Meg Tilly, Robert Loggia from Independence Day, Dennis Franz from NYPD Blue, Vera Miles comes back. I thought they all did a great job. And Richard Franklin, I mean, this is a director who did Road Games, which I love, with Stacy Keach. Later on, he did Link, which I'll review that sometime. That's the killer Monty movie with Elizabeth Shue and Terrence Stamp. And Richard Franklin was a study of Alfred Hitchcock. He even met Hitchcock and invited him to like one of his classes. And it's a ballsy thing to say, I want to make the sequel to Psycho. But he did it, and I honestly think it's a better movie than Psycho. I really do. I like the beginning where it's in black and white and we see it go to color. Like I said, I like that the story centers on Anthony Perkins, who I thought this was his best acting role in this movie. Because Norman Bates, again, he's just trying to live a normal life, and it's one of those things where it seems like everyone wants him to be the murderer again. And one reviewer said it best, like, everyone wants him to be the murderer again, and the only way to set things normal is for him to be in that role. That's what this world almost tells. Now, I know that there was a novel of Psycho 2, which was a very different sort of satirical state on slasher films, where it was a slasher film set in Hollywood. And I don't know all the details of that, but I can understand why they went in this route. Like, now let's not use Robert Bloch's Psycho 2. Let's create a story of our own. And again, Norman Bates, he goes back to the motel and he's trying to run a normal life. The motel has become more of an adult motel, so he fires the owner at there, Dennis Franz. He works at this diner, and anywhere he goes, he keeps finding these notes from Mother. It's like, wait a minute, like, what's going on here? He meets this woman, Meg Tilly, who stays with him at his house, and then you find out certain things are going on, and then certain people get killed, and the suspense is it Norman Bates off his rocker again? Is there someone else doing it? Are they just people trying to make him insane to get him back into the institution? And that's what I mean. The plot's a very interesting way of doing it. It's not the plot of a typical, quote, slasher film. It's a character study on Norman Bates. I think it's suspenseful when you're like, well, who is the killer and who's not? What's really going on? And I thought the way it was handled was very satisfying. I mean, Tom Holland, who would go on to, I know he's got the same name as the guy who plays Spider-Man, the new one, but this is Tom Holland, the director of Fright Night and Child's Play. Before he did those two, he wrote this film. I know the film's on Blu-ray. It actually has a commentary of Tom Holland. Maybe one day I'll pick that up, because I do enjoy the film. I like to hear what he has to say about it. But the direction by Richard Franklin, you tell he's a study of Hitchcock, and I did some really nice looking shots, like when he finds the first note, and then a memory flashes back of him and poisoning his mother, and the way that was shot, and certain image on the door handle. And the way the director and writing really, like I said, make you feel sorry for Norman Bates, so that there's a point where he slumps to the ground and his head's down, and he's like, it's starting again. And he puts his head down more. He's like, oh man, you really, for a guy who has murdered people that we saw in Psycho 1, yet you feel sorry for him. You feel bad for him. And Anthony Perkins, you gotta give a lot of credit, rest in peace Anthony Perkins. You gotta give a lot of credit to him, to making this character that type, where he's not really a character I hate in a weird way. And then getting more into spoilers, so fair warning, spoilers. The idea that Vera Miles and her daughter, which is Meg Tilly, they are trying to make him insane, so they appear in the window, or they leave him the notes at the diner and all this stuff to get him back in the institution, because of course Vera Miles is upset that, this guy, which I can understand, but it's like, leave him the fuck alone then. Don't be stupid and try to make a guy go insane again. Anything that happens to you, it's your own dumb fault, to be honest. And then Meg Tilly has a change of heart because, she sees that Norman is really trying, but then too little too late. Sort of how all the dominoes fall in this flick. Like, which I thought this was a weird choice on her part. Meg Tilly putting on the costume and wig, because now Norman is fully thinking he's hearing his mother, so she dresses as the mother. See, I'm not on the phone, I'm right here. Which, of course, that bites her back on the ass. And then there's a point where Norman Bates is saying, my real mother, this Mrs. Bates took care of me, this is my real mother, and she's been the one doing the killing to protect me. And of course, when he says that, you're like, okay, yeah, he's crazy. But he was right. Like, when you go back and rewatch the film, when he says, and he's sitting down, she's been the one doing the killing to protect me. And then you're like, holy shit, he was right all along. Because you find out this woman who also worked at the diner, she was actually the real mother of Norman Bates. But she was institutionalized, so he was with Mrs. Bates. Which some people had a problem with that. I didn't. I thought it was pretty clever, pretty interesting. I know they fixed that in Psycho 3. And I did. Psycho, the original, I will say I've liked it more on repeat viewings. I don't love the film, but I don't hate it like I used to. I appreciate Jenny and Anthony Perkins and the direction and the music. It's just the second half of that film, I don't care for the characters that Vera Miles or her boyfriend plays. I just don't care. But Psycho 2 is my favorite. Psycho 3 I liked, but I don't love. I reviewed Psycho 3 on the channel for those interested. I did Psycho 3, I don't know, just, it wasn't as interesting as Psycho 2 plot-wise. It was back to Norman Bates, killing again. The whole thing where this girl, and she looks like Marion Crane, and I'm like, okay, I guess. Jeff Fahey was fun in that, though. It's an okay film, just something about it never clicked as well as Psycho 2 did for me. Psycho 4, for a TV movie, not that bad. I mean, Harry Thomas as a young Norman Bates did a good job. Anthony Perkins. And it is sort of, he's with a woman and they're gonna have a baby, and in a way, Anthony Perkins is cured in a way by the end. He burns the place down, and you're to assume he's gonna be fine. So it's probably one of the rare horror franchises where it has, by the end of the franchise, a killer that, go off to have find his happy place, I guess. But Psycho 4, I don't mind. And the Psycho remake is just a Xerox and a useless, pointless piece of shit. But this one, I like the idea that, it was this woman doing it. Okay, and then you have that great death where the one person he kills is the killer. Now, granted, the reasons for him doing it is psycho, but, he hits her in the head with the shovel, which is pretty well done. I mean, no cuts. You see it hit the shovel, and then you cut to her, shaking. Like she got ants in her pants. And, now, sadly, he's back to normal for Norman. And it is, like that reviewer said, it's like everyone wants him to be the murderer again. They got their wish. So that's what I mean. It's a tragedy, the story. It's a tragedy. Like, if they just left him alone and didn't bother him, all these people, this crazy bitch and Vera Miles and Meg Tilly, if they all left him alone, he probably would have been fine. So, you created the monster, now you gotta deal with it. So, that's what I mean. It brings an interesting story, interesting tale to the proceedings. And I did handle with Anthony Perkins doing a great job acting. So did Meg Tilly, Dennis Franz, Robert Loggia. If you go into this for gore, there's not a lot of gore. I mean, Dennis Franz gets a decent cut in the face. Robert Loggia's death, which was an accident by Meg Tilly's character. I like the bit that he falls, and when he lands, the knife embeds deeper in the body. That was a nice touch. The shovel to the head. Oh, well, the most graphic death is Vera Miles' character. How could I forget this? Where the knife goes in her mouth and out the back of the neck. That's definitely the most graphic kill. And probably the most surprising is this was a character from the first movie, and maybe because I'm not partial to that character from the first movie, so it didn't bother me, but maybe they got more upset about that. But I didn't. Overall, I mean, the direction by Richard Franklin, the wonderful performance by Anthony Perkins that really gives a sense of sympathy. Which, I mean, for a character that's psycho, the give of sympathy for that shows how good of an actor Anthony Perkins is. And the score by Jerry Goldsmith, the supporting cast, everyone did their jobs very well in Psycho 2. It's definitely one of the more surprising sequels. I think even, like I said, critics even said, you know what, it's not as bad as people thought it would be. And that's a tall order in themselves, and the fact that they succeeded means you had a lot of talented people, and that's true. Like Richard Franklin, may he rest in peace, he was a talented director. Tom Holland, great writer and director, as we've seen with Fright Night and Child's Play and others. Anthony Perkins, very talented actor. I've always been a fan of Anthony Perkins. Even when I didn't like Psycho originally, I always said, but Anthony Perkins did a good job. Nowadays, I don't mind Psycho. It's not a favorite, but I don't mind it. There's other Alfred Hitchcock films I prefer, like Rear Window and The Birds. But I watched Psycho over Vertigo. I'm not a fan of Vertigo. I'm sorry. I watched that. Did not care for it. But that's just me. But anyway, Psycho 2, great flick. Great sequel. So thanks for watching. Take care, and we will see you in the next video. Later.